Thank you to Govee for sponsoring today's video. Hello everyone, it's SpawnPoiint and this is Sony's smallest OLED TV, the 42-inch A90K. It's a 4K screen with VRR, 120Hz and Dolby Vision support. It's packing some great features for both movies and gaming, but today I'll be unboxing, setting it up and using it on my gaming setup. I'll go over the specs, features and my first impressions, and how it performs on the PlayStation 5. Then over the next couple of weeks I will be using this exclusively on my setup so I can follow it up with a full review. I might even compare this to the LG C2, the 42-inch version, as this is the most likely competitor at this size. Now this A90K is a 2022 model, but with the current discounts available this is still a great buy. Okay, so here's the box with the plain packaging that we're used to seeing now, along with the dimensions in case you fancied picking this up from a store. But let's get this opened up and see what we get inside. We have a pack of manuals and safety information, 2 brackets that connect to the TV stand, 2 spacers which can be used to heighten the TV, 2 packets of screws, 2 remote controls, a couple of plastic covers, some batteries for the remote controls, and the stand itself, which is made from metal so it's pretty heavy. And when it comes to setting this up, it's really easy. As it's the 42-inch version, you could do this on your own as it's light enough and small enough, but it's definitely easier to have someone else help you out. Now there are 2 ways you can install the stand, either flush to your desk with almost no clearance at all, or heightened by a few inches using the spacers. This comes down to personal preference as the footprint of the stand is exactly the same. I quite like the lowered look as it means you cannot see the cables behind your TV. But it does give you less room for placing items in front or underneath it, things like a soundbar. Whereas this is how it looks with the spacers fitted, so as you can see it heightens the stand by a couple of inches. Either way you attach the bracket or the spacers to the stand first using the provided screws, and then you slide the TV on top which will hold it in place. Then simply fit the remaining screws and we're good to go. Before we flip this around, let's take a quick look at the rear. So the A90K has the same rear design as the A95K that I reviewed last year. So this plastic honeycomb pattern covers almost the entire panel. It's quite chunky too, but this does house all of the internals, although the frame itself or the edge of the TV is very thin and it's made from metal. We've got the VESA holes in the middle here which measure 200 by 200, so if you wanted to wall mount it or attach it to an arm you can use these screws. And here are the dimensions of the TV which might help you decide if it will fit in your setup. And for reference, my desk is 160cm by 80cm to give you an idea of the overall size. On the left side we've got the power cable which is fitted. You could remove it if you wanted to unscrew the panel first, but it's not a removable power cable as such. Then on the right side we've got all of the available ports. There are 4 HDMI ports, 2 of these are HDMI 2.0 and 2 are HDMI 2.1. One of these are actually used for eARC, so although that's great if you've got a soundbar or an AVR, it does take up one of the 2 4K 120Hz ports. Then we have a LAN port, optical out, aerial port and a USB port. There's another USB port on the side as well as a center channel speaker port, and that allows you to use your TV as the center channel in your setup. And those plastic covers that I mentioned earlier can now be fitted to hide all of your cables and keep the rear looking a little bit tidier. Let's get this flipped around and power it on. Running through the on-screen prompts and messages only takes you a few minutes, and as this uses the Google TV operating system, you can just log straight in using the QR code if you already have a Google account. Then the first thing I would recommend doing is checking for any available updates, just to make sure you're on the latest version. Okay, so here it is. This is the 42-inch A90K, and on first impressions, this looks nice. The screen is clear and vibrant, which isn't a surprise with it being an OLED, but it's also got the ultra-thin bezels around the screen, which immediately gives it that premium look. Now, although the back of the TV is plastic, the thin frame and the stand are actually metal, which feels and looks a lot nicer than it being plastic. And as mentioned, you can have the stand either high or low, and I think the low looks so much nicer overall. I know it means it's going to eat into your space on your desk, but realistically, I don't think you're going to fit much under here anyway. So yeah, from a design point of view, this looks nice. And it's awesome that it sits almost completely straight, unlike the A95K, which leans back quite a lot. And before we take a look at the gaming features on this, let me quickly talk about today's sponsor, Govee. Over the last year, I've been slowly adding more of their lights to my setups, including bulbs, strips and lamps. But the latest one is this, the TV Backlight T2 kit. The kit completely transforms any TV between 55 and 85 inches into this awesome RGB vibe. But these aren't static solid colors, these sync with the image on screen to the LEDs behind the TV. So I fitted the larger kit to my 77-inch OLED, and the color matching, response and immersion is just next level. It uses a camera that you simply fit on top of your TV using the gravity mechanism, and it will sync to whatever you're showing on your screen. This will work with movies including Netflix or Amazon Prime, and it will of course work with gaming as well. So playing on the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X looks crazy immersive, especially at night. And if you have other Govee lamps or lights, you can sync those too, creating a whole vibe in your room. So if you like RGB in your setup, check out the link below to this kit. And now for the picture quality. So this is a 4K OLED screen, which means not only is the image super clear when displaying any 4K content, the black levels and contrast are near perfect. Now, like with a lot of OLEDs, the screen is glossy rather than matte, which gives us better contrast and image clarity, but it does mean there's risk of reflections, especially in those dark areas on a bright day. In my room, I can control the lighting, but even in here, I can still see my other lights in the room or the desk setup behind me. It's not really a huge concern, but it's always worth bearing in mind. So this is an OLED panel rather than the newer QD OLED, which means it's not going to get quite as bright as those, but if you are in a room where you can manage the light and it's not near a window, this is plenty bright enough. In fact, I've actually reduced the brightness of the TV today very slightly just so I could record this without it looking blown out. And I think if you're using this as a monitor like me, you won't need to go any brighter for day-to-day use. Then we have the clarity and the contrast, which is decent, but it's the colors that look incredible. Sony uses something called Cognitive Processor XR, which essentially allows the A90K to reproduce real-world colors, and this is shown across movies and gaming. During my full review, I will cover all of the features in more detail, but it supports 4K upscaling, super resolution, Dolby Atmos, and the big one, Dolby Vision. This means any HDR content that you watch that offers Dolby Vision will look amazing on here. Then there's the gaming features, which is what has really impressed me already. It supports 4K and 120Hz. That means if you're using the PS5 or the Xbox Series X like I do, this TV is perfect for those. I mean, you could say it ticks pretty much every box that you need if you're gaming on those consoles, and PC too if you're happy with 120Hz. This includes the 4K 120, ALLM or the Auto Low Latency mode, VRR which is variable refresh rate, and the big one, Auto HDR tone mapping. Now this is a feature that not many TVs support, but it's perfect for the PS5. So what this does is automatically adjust the HDR settings for the PS5 without needing to mess around with them yourself. This is a small feature that a lot will underestimate the power of, but something I'm really happy to see. And as mentioned, this does support 4K 120, and that's because you get two HDMI 2.1 ports. I think for a monitor setup, this is probably enough for most. But as a TV, only having two where one is used for eARC could be a limitation. I'll be using this mainly for the PS5, but it could be hooked up to a PC or a Mac for productivity reasons. It doesn't have a USB-C or DisplayPort though, so you would need to use it with an HDMI cable instead. But back to the gaming, Sony reports this has an input lag of just 8.5 milliseconds when using the dedicated gaming mode, which is rapid. Pair that with the VRR, ALLM and the Auto HDR tone mapping, this is looking like a great TV or monitor for gaming. There are really only two features that this TV is actually lacking. I will of course cover these in my full review, but one of those is 1440p and the other one is a dedicated gaming hub, something that we've often seen across the LG as well as the Samsung TVs. Taking a quick look at the UI, well, it uses the Google TV operating system, which I've come around to really liking. It's got this nice tile format layout where all of the apps or trending shows are displayed. Now, you'll either love or hate it, but I think this is so much nicer than some of the other TVs out there. If I could actually sideload Google TV onto my LG TVs, I definitely would. I think it's super clean, easy to use, and fast. I mean, navigating around the menus and dash is rapid, and it is never lagged out on me. But if you're using a Fire Stick or an Apple TV or even your games console to watch TV and various apps, the UI on the TV may make no difference to you at all. Now, depending on where you're based, you might get one or two remote controls. The first one is what I would call a traditional TV remote. It's got every button you could possibly need, but it's not the nicest looking thing. It's certainly not going to win any prizes for best design. But then we have this second remote control, which is this nice slim, small metal remote with only a handful of buttons. But these are the buttons you will most likely need and use on a day-to-day basis. Here in the UK we do get both remote controls, but I believe some countries you'll only get this one instead. Now, although I'll likely be using my headset while gaming, it's still great to have use of the internal speakers. These include two speakers and one subwoofer which are positioned behind the screen. Sony have called this Acoustic Surface Audio Plus, where the sound vibrates through the screen itself, giving a far more immersive experience. And then don't forget you've got that center channel port on the back. So if you wanted to, you could use this TV with a 5.1 surround sound system and use the TV as the center channel. So over the next couple of weeks, I will be using this TV as my gaming setup monitor, so anything I play will be done on here. This should give me enough time to really test it out and compare it to the 27-inch LG OLED that I've been using for the last 4 months and the 42-inch LG C2. There are some pros and cons to them all, but I will cover that in my full review. Overall though, this is looking like a great TV or monitor for my setup, but any questions you've got about it, please drop those below and I will try to answer those. Now drop a Sony OLED in the comments and I'll give you a thumbs up for staying right to the end. And if you did enjoy today's video, check out my Sony A90K review video next, as it covers one of the best but most expensive TVs that I've ever reviewed. Well, thank you for watching. Please like, sub and follow me over on Instagram and Twitter. Until next time.